Good morning. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, January 16th, 2025. I will now ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Tuesday, January 7th, 2025, and each has informed me there's no need to discuss the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of the open meeting of Tuesday, January 7, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 17. The suggested minute associated with agenda item 18, approving the request of Walnut Way for intervenor compensation in the amount of $23,020 for its participation in docket 6630 CG 140. Or the suggested minute associated with agenda item 19, granting current electrical's request for a temporary waiver of WIS admin code PSC 113.0803 sub 3's individual metering requirement for an existing building for 24 months from the date of the order due to the exceptional or unusual circumstances presented by its request, by exercising the Commission's authority to adopt requirements different than those provided in the administrative code pursuant to WIS Admin Code Section PSC 113.01 sub 2, provided current electric not resell energy to tenants, disconnect tenants for non-payment, provide documentation to WPSC demonstrating its inability to obtain the necessary metering equipment, and provide quarterly status updates as to the anticipated arrival and installation of metering equipment.
All right, I move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 2 through 14.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move we approve the notices of proceeding associated with agenda items 15 through 17.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. In docket 1IC 569, I move we approve Walnut Way's intervenor compensation request in the amount of $23,020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. And in docket 6690 EI 121, I move we grant current electrical's request for a temporary waiver for a period of 24 months due to exceptional or unusual circumstances with the order conditions listed on page 10 of our memo.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to our next agenda item, number 20, which is our one discussion item for today. This is docket 5 CE 154, Maple Grove Solar's application for a certificate of convenience of public convenience and necessity. Commissioner Nieto has actually agreed to lead our discussion today, so I'm going to turn it over to her to get us started. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Strand. On February 13, 2023, Maple Grove Solar, an independent power producer wholly owned by IBV Energy Partners, filed an application with the PSC to receive a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, or CPCN, for the authority to construct a solar electric generation facility, battery energy storage system, or BESS, and a generator tie line in Barron County, Wisconsin. The solar portion of the project is a solar PV electric generation facility made up of multiple proposed project array areas, which would be fenced. The solar facility would have a nameplate generation capacity of up to 259.6 megawatts AC and connect up to 228 megawatts AC to the electrical grid. There would also be a 50 megawatt DC battery energy storage system comprised of lithium-ion batteries, and a fraction of the energy generated by the solar facility would flow directly into the BESS and could be released during peak hours or when flexibility is needed. A 1.7 mile, 161 kV gen tie line would be required to connect the project collector substation to the Barron substation. We are reviewing the applicant's request for a CPCN today pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 196.491 sub 3 and Wisconsin Admin Code Chapter PSC 111. The proposed project is a Type 2 action under Wisconsin Admin Code Section PSC 4.10 sub 2. The Commission prepared an environmental assessment and a supplemental environmental assessment for this project that evaluate the location of the project and its potential environmental, community, and private property impacts. Renew and Clean Wisconsin both intervened and support the project. This project, which represents a significant investment in Wisconsin's clean energy transition, will introduce a large domestic source of renewable generation to the state, will deliver significant economic benefits to the region, and will significantly reduce greenhouse gas and air pollutant emissions while also providing local economic benefits. This project represents a 6% increase in Wisconsin's overall solar generation capacity. I agree with Renew's statement that the Maple Grove Solar Project is an efficient, well-designed, and well-presented project. This project will reduce CO2 emissions from Wisconsin's generation mix between 5.6 to 7.6 billion pounds over its life. And in the first year alone, Renew witness Belkey estimated that the project will save nearly $1.13 million to $2.2 million in healthcare costs. With limited exceptions associated with proposed order points, no party or participating staff disagree with the issuance of a CPCN for the project. I found that the project meets all of the statutory requirements and will be voting to approve the project today. I found it was consistent with the Energy Priorities Law. The design and location of the project are in the public interest with conditions. And with some minor modifications and conditions mostly already agreed to voluntarily by the applicant, the project is not expected to produce any adverse impacts on humans or the natural environment. So we saw some good public engagement, both from people who had personal concerns about the project, as well as those who were in favor of it and the benefits it could bring to the area. We received 32 public comments during the EA scoping period, and at our 2 public hearings in the project area, we saw about 15 people provide public comment. Then we also held an open comment period, and we saw about as many people provide written comment as well. Public engagement is a critically necessary component of the process of reviewing these siting requests, and I do appreciate those who took the time and effort to give their input. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleagues for any initial remarks they would like to make. Chair Strand?
Thank you, Commissioner Ito, and thank you for that great introduction. I don't have anything to add other than just echoing your thank yous to the people who participated.
Thank you. And Commissioner Hawkins?
Yeah, agree, great introduction. And I think one thing to add on the public participation that I think we can consider for maybe how we improve our messaging was there were some public comments at the public hearing about the utility aid payments, and it just jumped out to me as that's something we could provide more information on how that works and how it works with Department of Revenue and gets the money to the local communities. And so that's just something that I really appreciated hearing from members of the public on that process and trying to understand how the revenues flow to their communities. And so I just that's something I'm going to follow up with staff on how we communicate that to the local entities involved.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. With that, we will walk through the decision matrix that we have here, and we will vote on the contested issues. We will not discuss uncontested issues, except that the Commission Secretary has informed me one of my colleagues wishes to discuss issue number 6, so we'll take that one up when we get there. Looking at the decision matrix here, issue number 1 is uncontested, as is issue number 2. And issue number 3 relates to the requirement in Wisconsin statute section 196.491 sub 3 sub D 6 that the project not unreasonably interfere with orderly land use and development plans. On this issue, I was at alternative 1. Chair Strand?
Alternative 1, thank you.
Thanks.
Alternative 1 for me as well.
Great, thank you. And issue 4 is uncontested. Issue 5 is related to the design and location of the project, considering the statutory criteria, and should the commission modify the proposed siting areas. I'm at alternative 1 here. I found that all of the proposed and alternative sites for the solar arrays, BESS, and associated facilities do meet the siting criteria. I will say that pursuant to the statute that we're looking at here, we have to consider alternative locations, and applicants have to provide us with 25% additional locations to review, and those have to be feasible ones. The project and the application here did meet those alternative siting requirements. The project itself would be located on approximately 1,559 acres of land in the towns of Barron and Maple Grove in Barron County. And of that acreage, approximately 889 acres would make up the primary area to host the solar facility. So the applicant did identify 272 additional acres of land to meet that 25% standard above what would be the project's nameplate capacity. I did agree with the applicant and the interveners that the primary site is superior and the primary arrays, they maintain a more contiguous layout with fewer abutting participating landowners and are located closer to existing transmission infrastructure and the point of interconnection to reduce potential energy losses in the collection system. Therefore, I would approve the use of the full primary site. And with regard to the alternate arrays, we do have standard order language that essentially says if the applicant needs, it can use alternate arrays as the construction process unfolds, and it has to notify us within 30 days of a decision to use alternative arrays. And I'm just pointing this out because in this case, we had some alternate arrays identified, first of all, in the environmental assessment as having potential negative environmental impacts due to an amount of required tree clearing that might have to happen. Those were A2, A3, and A8. However, it was also identified that some of the tree clearing had already taken place on that private property in those areas. And then A2 was identified again in a public comment from a landowner whose home would be surrounded by arrays if A2 or alternate array 2 were selected. So I'd say the applicant indicated in testimony it was working with that landowner on a good neighbor agreement, but nothing yet had been reached. The applicant also indicated that it would be quite unlikely that that alternate array in that specific area would need to be used, particularly if the commission's approving the primary arrays, which I'm prepared to do here. So in light of those facts, I was comfortable with alternative 1. One other thing I'd highlight under this section is, or under this issue in the decision matrix is, first of all, I think the applicant did a good job, thoughtful work in identifying project sites and in working with the local community. I'd note that the applicant and the county and local units of government are developing a JDA, joint development agreement, and the applicant already has 4 good neighbor agreements executed. And as Wedsky stated in rebuttal, the applicant will continue to work on visual impacts and on those good neighbor agreements. So something that caught my eye was that in at least 4 consecutive past similar solar projects, we have actually made the visual impacts issue an order condition. And we did not do that in Vista Sands, of course, because the actual area of the state is a little bit different, and vegetative screening was a different issue in that case. So I appreciate the applicant voluntarily offering to work with screening with these neighboring properties, but I would also apply the actual order point that we've been using consistently in our orders. I think it's important to include it as an explicit order point here so staff can track it and members of the public can track it without having to dig into the record that it was something that was voluntarily agreed to. So that order condition has read, the applicant shall work with interested non-participating landowners that are adjacent to solar panel arrays on one or more sides of their property to create visual buffers and screening in order to mitigate visual impacts to the extent reasonable and economically feasible and not otherwise impeding solar operations or access to sunlight. So with that, I'm at Alt 1, but adding that condition. Chair Strand?
Thank you, and thank you for that robust discussion. I will not belabor the point. I'm also at alternative 1, and I also read the record the way that you did or interpreted it the way you did, that the primary arrays are much preferred to the alternative arrays, and it sounds like that's where the construction is going to occur. I am comfortable with your standard order condition or your order condition addition regarding visual screening, and specifically like it because it includes the like reasonable or extent reasonable and practicable or similar language that gives a little bit of flexibility given kind of whatever happens like in the real world in real time when they're actually at that point in the project. So again, I'm comfortable with alternative one for the reasons that you stated. I think your addition helps make this better, which is, in my opinion, the role of the commission at this stage in the process. So I appreciate your thorough review and discussion of this one. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks. I'm also at alternative one and can support your additional condition. Agree with what both of you have said on that. And the reason we're discussing alt 6 today is because I had a condition that might be overlapping with the one that you just raised. So I'll discuss it here now, and we can circle back if we need to again. But you mentioned the JDAs as well as the good neighbor agreements and the commitment to continue to work with potentially impacted landowners on the screening. And in talking with staff, there's another standard order condition we've used in some CAs where it basically speaks to the fact that the developer has made commitments, and after we have used our CPCN, our lever's kind of done. And so it basically, the proposed condition would just capture that the developer would have to continue with its commitments that it's made in the record here, and that would cover JDA screening and good neighbor agreements, continuing to work towards them and not just stopping the progress that's being made in those areas. So I think it would include the screening, but I was originally focused on the JDA and the good neighbor agreements more generally. So I have some standard language that I can read either now or in issue 6, but the CA language is the applicant shall follow through on any other commitments it has made in the application for the commission's consideration in this docket. So because some of those things are still in flight, we don't have the benefit of seeing the outcome of those before issuing a CPCN. So I'll just add that in.
Thank you. Yes, I think I agree with the addition of that condition, and I think it's good just to have stated. And in terms of the overlap, it's a good issue to raise, and a little bit the way that I see areas of overlap or not overlap is, so something like screening, I think is good to explicitly call out as a separate order condition, and it's something that makes it trackable for staff without having to dig back into the record and for members of the public. And it's something that we've used quite consistently in the past, and you know, the commission, we may want to consider it as a potential standard order condition in the future. And then I see that as just a little bit different from other commitments, say to a commitment by the developer to donate money to the local school district, which was done here. Or like you said, JDA, good neighbor agreements. Those, I think, really fit well into that bucket of any other commitments. And so I see enough of a distinction here. We have a number of other order conditions that this applicant has already voluntarily agreed to that we'll get to, and I don't necessarily see those as overlapping with this one. So I think just as it's worded makes sense to me, and I would support that as well. Chair Strand?
I'll just say in general that, as you both are well aware, the development of our standard order conditions has been an iterative process, and I think we've continued to add or tweak or perfect, or at least try to perfect some of those as we've learned more about solar construction projects in Wisconsin in the last several years. And so I appreciate the work that has gone into that on developing those, but as your discussion has shown, there's always, room for improvement. And then also as we'll discuss in some future issue areas for this project, we also have project-specific order conditions that refer specifically to these projects and are based on the uniqueness of these sites and these neighbors and all of the things that a project-specific condition would apply to that needs to be called out. So I think also, though, not every project requires the same conditions because of their uniqueness, but also we're just working on developing and trying to hone those as well. So I think when we get to the standard order conditions at 6, that's probably where we would be talking about standard conditions that we've seen in other ones that we'd like to carry through. And then when we're talking about project-specific conditions, that would really only apply to the projects before us. If, you know, those things are either specifically laid out in the decision matrix, or we can try to, again, improve the process on how those are developed and put forward to, in the decision matrix for those of us that are making a decision about the CPCN specifically. So that's my 2 cents more on process than anything else. Again, I'm comfortable with alternative 1 with your addition. I think Commissioner Hawkins' addition is decent as well. If we are, do you still want to discuss 6 when we get there, since what you're proposing is more standard, or? Okay, so let's, if you guys are okay with it, and if this is clear to legal, we'll move forward with, I think where the 3 of us have consensus on alternative 1 with Commissioner Nietzsche's addition, and then when we get to 6, which is basically next, we'll just have maybe a little more of a general discussion about some of those standard conditions, and then we can kind of restate where you are to make sure that we're on the same page there.
That
that
sounds
okay?
good, yeah, and I
Okay.
appreciate Commissioner Nieto, you explaining your distinction of, and same with Chair Strand, how we have standard and we have specific, and it's, the piece on it's easier to track and see, I think, is important, because in hearing from the public, it is, I think, important to show just how much we can condition, and this is where the commission can understand the impacts and actually require things, and so having that separate from some of the standard items, I think, is important for the reasons that you raised.
Great. Great, well said. Thanks to you both. So we are on issue 5B, which is related to the route for the Gen tie line. And on this one, the primary and alternate routes share segments 1 and 3. So 2B is primary, 2A is alternate. I was at alternative 1 here, selecting the primary route. Chair Strand?
Alternative 1, and I appreciate the work that went into the supplemental EA as it was related to parts of this, so thank you.
Alternative 1 for me as well.
Thank you. All right, and now we are at the issue 6 on the standard order conditions. And again, we were going to circle back here and discuss a little bit whether I believe Commissioner Hawkins' addition is something that should become part of this list of standard order conditions going forward. So I'll turn it over to Chair Strand.
I'm just gonna have Commissioner Hawkins restate, and if you have them, also citations to other projects or recent projects that have included this one, please, thank you.
Absolutely, and I do not have the citations, but I can certainly follow up with staff and get those. But it was my understanding that this language that I'm about to read, suspense, is from our standard CA conditions, and it's not been applied to the CPCN, I think, because we've had this standard and then project-specific distinction. So maybe that's why it hasn't been captured. But the language is, the applicant shall follow through on any other commitments it has made in its application for the commission's consideration in this docket. And so we've seen a lot of language about continuing to work on JDAs, continuing to work on, good neighbor agreements. And in my discussion with staff, I just asked the question, how do we make sure that continues to happen? And then this is pointed to as, this is how we do it for our CA process. So that was sort of the origin story.
Thank you, that's a very helpful background and description. I also like just the general message that CPCN approval does not mean pencils down, stop working, stop negotiating, stop compromising, because that's actually when I think those things become even more important as the project moves further along. And I think, given the fact that this has been, present in other CAs, and is relevant here, and I don't really have legal concerns with that, I'm comfortable with adding that to this here. Obviously, developing and finalizing additional standard order conditions going forward will be a discussion that can occur after the fact, but definitely supportive of the inclusion here, and I appreciate the work and the time that you put in to identify that and to explain it to us. Thank you.
Great. Thanks to you both. That brings us to issues 7, 7A.
Sorry, just to be clear, so we're at alternative 2 with the addition of
Oh, thank
Commissioner
you.
Hawkins?
Yes.
Addition, is that? or-
I read alternative 2 as limiting the standard.
some, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so
So
it's
maybe
kind of a
it's a
new.
4.
Yeah, it's like
So
however you do
6A
that.
through 6X plus the addition are necessary for the
Yes.
proposed project? Okay, so, yes, you guys?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
perfect, thank you. Just wanted to make sure we were being clear on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so the next issue that we're discussing here is flagged as uncontested. This is one that I'd like to raise because there is a minor correction that looks like it needs to be made. 7A says the applicant shall avoid tree clearing activities during the period of April 1 through August 15. I believe that needs to be March 15 through August 15, based on the record and based on what was agreed to in rebuttal testimony. So I would actually be at Alt 2 here, condition 7A as modified, and modify that date. Chair Strand?
Thank you. I'm also at alternative 2. I think it's important for us to specify the actual avoidance period of March 15th through August 15th. The only other minor modification that I would propose in previous CPCNs, including recently, we've added this flexibility language to the extent reasonably possible to certain project-specific conditions, because I think it helps with clarity, consistency, and flexibility purposes. We know, based on our previous discussion and from the record, that the applicant is aware of forestation areas here and wanting to avoid as many tree clearing activities as possible, especially in this agreed-upon time period. But I think both of those modifications here just brings more clarity to our decision and to all parties involved going forward. So again, I'm at Alt 2 with the modification regarding the timeline, and then also just adding that extent reasonably possible language for some additional flexibility.
Thank you. And Commissioner Hawkins?
Yeah, I'm good with the modification to the modification as laid out by the chair. I'm at Alt 2 as well.
Great, and I'll join on the modification to the modification. Thank you. All right, and on 7B, we have the fencing condition, and I was comfortable with Alt 2 here modifying as requested by the applicant. Chair Strand?
I was at alternative 2 with that modification as well, just so we're very clear about the 6 inches off the ground that they agreed to and not including the or 7 by 12 option, because we know that that's problematic and the 6 inches is not and has been agreed to. So yes, again, clarity, important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the clarity, and I'm in the same place.
Great, thank you. 7C is uncontested. 7D is vegetation management, mowing time of year restrictions. I was at alternative 1 here. Again, with some of the caveats the applicant is discussing in its party position, but essentially they have agreed to meet and discuss those restrictions, and I was fine with that. Chair Strand?
Thank you. So I, too, took note of the applicant's concerns with the specific mowing restrictions that have been discussed, and I do appreciate their willingness to sit down further and agree to this condition where they would discuss this issue with DNR staff and with our staff. So I can support that condition if it is truly just that, at this point, a discussion on the issue to see if some sort of compromise can be reached between the parties. I don't want, if we as a commission decide to approve this condition, I don't want it to be perceived as a green light from us for staff to, DNR or PSC, to impose overly burdensome vegetation management mowing restrictions on the applicant, given the concerns that they've raised. So my expectation is that because this would be requiring a discussion, that these conversations would be constructive and not adversarial. This is a little open-ended to me, but I think it's reasonable. So I can join you at Alt 1 with kind of those statements about the tone of those discussions, or the tenor.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. I'm also at Alt 1, and I shared some of the concerns raised by the chair on, she put it as open-endedness, but I was thinking like we're kind of pre-requiring things in the future, and that gave me a little squeamishness. But it did seem like there was a good back and forth here in the record as far as the near term and the mowing restrictions there. And so I do have hope that there is some good faith discussion going on here about what is truly best for the project and also for the environment and the establishment of the vegetation. So I'm comfortable with it, but it did give me some unease about the open-endedness as well.
No, thanks to you both, and I was looking at it similarly and wanting to acknowledge specifically in the party position that Maple Grove Solar just can't agree to the previously proposed restrictions and raised some pretty significant valid concerns with those. And I'm with you both just in terms of the intent and tone of what we're requiring on this one. So thank you. 7E, I would be at alternative 2. This is the same wetland and waterway BMP that has been proposed in other solar construction. I think it's fine to use the where possible language as proposed by the applicant. Chair Strand?
Thank you. So just to be clear on 7E sub V, as the applicant wants to add it there?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm very supportive of that as well. So alternative 2 with that modification. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I am in the same place, Alt 2, with the change to 7EV.
Great, thank you. All right, 7F is uncontested. 7G is not listed as uncontested. I think it is essentially uncontested. I'm at alternative 1. The applicant has agreed to submit a site-specific winter stabilization plan along with the stormwater pollution prevention plan. One party did list that they supported Alt 2, but I think this is essentially an uncontested issue here. I'm at Alt 1.
Yeah, and I just want to note, there was a prior one where in the decision matrix it was listed as uncontested, but typically would have then the uncontested alternative. It's still listed the alternatives. So I presume, again, it's alternative 1 is the uncontested alternative.
Yes.
And here, same thing.
Thank you.
So just to be
Yep.
clear for those following along, that was selected as Alt 1 for the prior one as well.
Thanks.
So despite the perceived uncontested nature of this, of 7G, I'm actually at alternative 3. I think I'm consistently at alternative 3 on this condition. I don't think the record on this proposed condition was robust. I did not see clear evidence demonstrating the potential benefits of this proposed condition. So this is a project-specific condition. So absent specific justification in the record about how requiring this plan is beneficial to this specific project site, I don't support the inclusion of this condition. I think, one, this is consistent with how I viewed this condition on previous similar projects. I think it's somewhat duplicative when you analyze it in conjunction with other required conditions, especially the best management practices that the applicant preemptively committed to undertake as discussed in the record and required by the inclusion of the standard conditions that we just approved in issue 6. And I just worry about increasing costs, prolonging the schedule, et cetera. So if we're gonna impose this condition on future project-specific condition projects, I think we need better justification as to why it's necessary or beneficial and to help differentiate this site from the other required conditions, or this plan from the other required things in the standard conditions and in project-specific conditions. So conditions, activities, plans, reports, et cetera. So again, it's not any animosity towards like this project specifically or this plan specifically. I'm not comfortable with adding duplicative conditions without really strong justification in the record. So alternative 3, but that's not a new position for me.
Okay, thanks, Chair Strand. And Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks. I appreciate the explanation of how you're viewing this, Chair Strand, and I was at Alt 1 because the applicant and everyone kind of arrived there, and I do think either way, this is something we should give some more thought to as far as the overlap goes between the standard conditions and already committing to the BMPs. And so I'm fine sticking at alt 1 here because the applicant has arrived at that as well and agreed with the DNR witness recommendation here. So I'm fine sticking there, but I have a new appreciation for what we need to do to clean up this requirement versus our standard requirements. So, yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Commissioner Huckins. And I'll stay at alternative 1, similar to how I've viewed this issue in other cases. And I will say, to Chair Strand's point, I think some of this can be cleaned up a little because there was some discussion in the record about how the stormwater pollution prevention plan, that's a separate report and filing, but that these two plans could be filed together. And I think there's like a little crossover there. And I think, as you're both saying, some opportunity to get a little bit of additional clarity and ensure that there's no overlap. But otherwise, I'm at alt 1 there. Thanks. And Chair Strand, would you like to
Yeah, no, I'll
note?
stay at 3. And again, I think I'm not opposed to winter stabilization plans, but we need more specific justification as to why they're needed on specific projects going forward, if it's going to become something, if we're going to consider this for all of the future projects, which we've seen this a lot recently, we need to distinguish between what we're requiring and wanting in best management practices under the standard conditions, and then how this addition to that helps at these specific sites.
At the specific
And the
site.
benefit that it brings to a specific project, not just a general statement, one general sentence in the record about that this, recommending that this happens. That's all.
Great.
I just need better justification. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that would be great, and it would be good to analyze as well, because there have been sites with hilly terrain where that's a contributing factor, sites where there have been compacted soils, and that's a contributing factor, and these are site-specific discussions, so agree with developing that further in the future. 7H is uncontested. 8A, 8 and 8A are uncontested, or 8A is uncontested, excuse me. 8B is, will the proposed project have undue adverse impact on other environmental values? I'm at alternative 1, no, it will not, for 8B.
Yeah, and just again, it's alt 1, even though it's listed as uncontested, just so we're clear.
Thank you,
On
On 7H,
Yep.
yep.
thank you.
Okay, so 7H, alt 1, I think, consistent for the three of us, and then
Yes.
8B, I'm at alt 1 as well. Thank you.
8B, I am at alt 1 as well.
Thank you. All right, and then issue 9, should the commission grant a CPCN for the proposed project? Here I was at alternative 2, yes, we should grant a CPCN with conditions.
Alt 2, thank you.
Thanks.
Same for me, alt 2.
Great, thank you. All right, and are we ready for a motion? Good. In docket 5 CE 154, I move we approve Maple Grove Solar's request for a CPCN consistent with our discussion today.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, sorry, thank you, and thank you for leading our discussion. You did a great job, and I think we had a lot of good conversation about the various aspects of the project. That does conclude our official business for today. Our next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, January 23rd, 2025 at 10:30 a.m. May I please have a motion to adjourn?
I move we stand adjourned until Thursday, January 23rd, 2025 at 10:30 a.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.